Hello everybody, welcome back to Cemetery Scout and welcome to the Cooper-Mowry lot here in Burrillville, Rhode Island. Now I really only have one super detailed story to tell you about in this cemetery, but I do have a couple smaller things to go over before we get there. So let's get to it. Like, to start, just looking over this very pretty cemetery, you can notice a few real cool things. One of the first things that caught my eye were these giant maple trees here on the perimeter of the cemetery. See, there's two right over there, and then an absolutely massive one right here. These were probably planted around the same time that the cemetery was established. And you can tell that they were saved from clearing when a lot of the other trees in the area were cut down. That's why they're just so much bigger than all the other trees you can see on the outside of the perimeter. All right, let's go over a few of the people buried in this cemetery. This right here is Matthew Blanchard. I found a record of him being paid $15.40 by the state of Rhode Island via court order back in 1855. And right here is Corbin Cooper. Back in 1852, he was paid $15.04 by the state of Rhode Island, again via court order. Now, despite my best efforts, I really could not find any other information behind these payments, why they were made, or really anything at all about either Matthew or Corbin's life beyond those court records. Kind of weird to think about, huh? Despite the fact that these two both led long lives full of hopes and dreams and worries, love and fear, work and recreation and hobbies, years and years later, they're just line items on a treasury report, at least as far as I can find. It's really impossible to know how you're going to leave your mark on the world, huh? Here's another cool one. I'm not sure if you can see this on camera super well, but there's a couple of deep indentations in the ground right here, right next to each other, which is almost for sure a sign that we've got either some unused graves here or graves that originally had someone buried in them who were then exhumed and moved to a different cemetery. I think that is probably more likely what happened because we've actually got, if you travel over the wall here, a whole bunch of old gravestones that are all in pieces littering the side here. You can also tell someone has been taking real good care of this cemetery. You can see that this grave was at one point in several pieces before someone picked it back up and put it back together. All right, check this one out. This is really cool. Right here is Celinda Cooper, right? But also right here is Celinda Cooper with literally the exact same information engraved on both stones. But they're in totally different gravestone styles and completely different engraving styles too. Now this is really weird, and I did a lot of research, but I couldn't figure out why Celinda has two stones here. It's not super uncommon for somebody to have two stones in the same graveyard if they have an individual stone and then also have their name carved into like a marriage stone with their spouse. But having two individual stones like this literally right next to each other in different styles is really uncommon. Here's my guess for why this happened. You can see on the right here, this stone is a whole lot newer, especially the base. See the difference there? Also, these squared off tops are way more modern than these rounded tops, and you can tell from the top too, it's a lot less polished on this one than on this one. So my guess is that maybe they were thinking about replacing the original stone with the new stone here, but then decided to just leave the original stone up anyway. Either that, or maybe someone couldn't find a record of Celinda being buried, so they commissioned this new stone and then eventually found the original one. I'm not sure, kind of a weird situation, but it's extremely cool to see something like this. Just totally different styles, same person, same exact info, down to the day. And lastly, I wanted to tell you about one of the coolest and most harrowing things I've ever found while looking stuff up for this show. You see there's a whole lot of Civil War veterans buried in this cemetery who fought in Rhode Island's 12th Infantry Regiment, like Shadrach Mowry, Rensselaer A. Cooper, and this man who I want to focus on, Moses B. Aldrich. You see, back in the fall of 1862, Rhode Island's 12th Infantry was sent down to Virginia to help guard the capital as a part of a whole bunch of little camps and makeshift forts that have been put together as extra protection ever since the Union lost the First Battle of Bull Run a year or so earlier. While he was stationed down there with the rest of his regiment, Moses here actually wrote a pretty remarkable letter that he sent back up to Rhode Island. Right off the bat, he talks about the total destruction he can see across the region and the massive size of the tent city that he's going to be living in. He describes the legion of tents as stretching far beyond his eyesight, including a section set aside to 10 to 16,000 wounded, sick, and dying soldiers. Just crazy to think about, right? But despite all that, the section I really want to repeat to you is Moses' description of when he first arrived in the camp and had his sleeping tent set up among the village. Here it is. They say that folks don't sleep with dead folks, but I don't believe it, for I have sleep with dead folks. They were fixing our tent, and the ground was uneven, and in digging it level, we dug 1 foot deep. We dug out a man that was buried in a few days after the Battle of Bull Run under where I sleep. But all of the ground is full of dead here. Don't worry, Moses, ain't no one gonna be sleeping on top of you. Rest easy, brother.